Okay, so Baldur's Gate 3 is like playing a game of D&D, but all of your friends are on your schedule and are just waiting to play whenever you want. Well, at least those friends would be.
If I had one! Sorry.
Ignore that. Baldur's Gate 3 is a dream RPG in many ways. It's got an immensely deep world with captivating characters, choices that can have huge consequences as well as small ones, and a rich, expansive world to explore that only gets more rewarding as you mine its depths. So here's me gushing about it for far too long. The game opens up with you as a captain of the Mind Flayers.
What the shit? That's the coolest name ever!
Who want to plant just a little guy into you. I mean, look at it. It's a real eyesore. You see what I did? Okay, look, we can't all have the charisma of Ryan Reynolds. This little bug will slowly turn you into a mind flayer, and naturally, you probably don't want that to happen, and thus the call to action is made. It's a goal that's both urgent enough to set you out on your journey and get you to explore the open world and sets up a very interesting mystery, while also giving you plenty of room to just fuck around the open world at your leisure and find out. Yeah, the whole turning into a mind flayer thing sounds bad and painful.
Day 4, excruciating pain as the skeleton and organs reform and reposition. Day 5, the host personality has disappeared, fingers and toes and limbs elongate. I take it you get the picture?
But since they never give you a concrete timeline for when it's going to happen, fuck it, let's romance some NPCs or adopt a dog. I mean, if Zelda didn't mind Link casually torturing some Koroks on his way to rescue her, I don't see the problem with a little bug in my eye. And once you escape the Mind Flayers, you go on a whimsical journey filled with fighting, adventure, romance, and if you play your cards right, a little bareback. The game gives you, frankly, a scary amount of options in battle. I mean, just look at the bar at the bottom of the screen. It's packed with everything from your movement, actions, cantrips, attack abilities, and maybe even a kitchen sink or two, I don't know, all into that one hotbar. If their goal is to make you feel like you have the same breadth of choices as you do in a D&D game, they succeeded. Some of the classes have enough options to build the game around on their own, and you get to control up to 4 of them, leading to tons of options and combos to pull off. We've seen people use a combination of boxes and teleportation arrows to get over castle walls, or the right potion with the right transformation to dish out some insane damage. If you're good at thinking outside of the box, you can come up with all sorts of solutions to any problem the game throws at you, and the game just works. It just lets you do it. I would often just stare at the level up screen, agonizing over what spell to take and especially which feat I wanted, because they could have huge effects on my build if I picked the right one, and then I do it all over again for the other characters in my party. Not to mention all the loot you can get on top of all that. And while some of that loot is just, this has better armor, or this does more damage, it's clear Larian doesn't want you to just trade up, because a lot of the loot's true value comes in its modifiers, the almost secondary skills they provide. I got a helmet early on that gives me bonus HP on any smite that applies a status effect. Another piece of gear let the barbarian best girl Karlach move even farther on turn 1, letting her close the gap and start swinging right away. This type of loot meant I almost never equipped something simply because number go up. It was always a tough choice and often one that made a noticeable difference in gameplay. But I have to admit, it felt like the combat didn't really start to come into its own until after you got a few levels in, which gave you access to new abilities and you start to actually be able to hit things with some consistency. The dice, they be fickle. And while it all seems like a lot, it's more intuitive than it seems at first blush. But you also gotta admit, it's an intimidating first blush, especially if you're coming from the likes of Fallout or more action-y RPGs like Mass Effect. But it all becomes simpler when you just categorize everything into, I can attack, I can move, and I can take a bonus action, which is usually just like drinking a health potion or something. And of course, all of that freedom extends outside of combat as well, with exploration, side quests, and all the options you have to deal with, just everything. Just the way side quests can escalate and go from convincing a few bandits to leave through dialogue to fighting undead monsters creates an interesting story no matter what. But side quests also often take you through every facet of the gameplay, so it never feels repetitive. Combat, dialogue, lockpicking, exploration, story, lore, it takes you through all of it, and it all feeds into each other and makes for a varied and rewarding gameplay. A good example comes early in my playthrough where in typical RPG fashion, after being set loose into the open world with a call to action, I immediately got sidetracked with some bandits by some ruins who seemed perfectly placed to draw the player in and subtly inform us that you're going to stumble onto stuff like this and they're worth pursuing. Thanks to some good rolls, I convinced the bandits to leave, but I could have snuck up to them and killed them, I could have intimidated them, fought them, or just ignored them entirely. With them dealt with, I investigated a cracked floor, which I expertly used to get the drop on bandits hiding in the ruins below, where I proceeded to use some explosive barrels to blow some of them up, careful to also blow myself up to throw them off. It's moments like that that are a mixture of successes and failures that result in some of the most memorable moments of the game. But I also could have used a boulder to break away the floor first and avoided some fall damage, or I could have just gone through the front door. There's also a back entrance I could have used, and who knows what else. I proceeded to explore the ruins further, which was littered with traps that a lucky perception roll tipped me off to, which required some puzzle solving, which got me some loot, which led to a crypt containing a magically sealed book my paladin was able to open, which inevitably led me to fighting a bunch of undead monks and reviving an undead necromancer who now just chills at my camp. Another quest started with me rummaging around some abandoned cellar and ended with me sneaking past a giant teleporting spider so I could get a gem that unlocks a necromancer's book made of human flesh, naturally, so my wizard can read it. And I could have gone about these quests in any number of ways. It all makes you want to explore even the most mundane places because they often reward you for it. And even if you're not into the loot you get or the story, performing actions that match what your party members would do gives you inspiration, which can be spent on valuable rerolls. So no matter what, exploration gives you cool shit, and your choices can often have both short-term consequences like getting cool loot, and long-term ones like the undead guy that now just chills at my camp, and the necromantic book that I'm sure making my wizard read won't come back to bite me. And these are all just side quests, but they're written so well and integrated into the game so naturally that they didn't feel like side quests. They didn't feel like video game quests you do just for loot and XP. You get that stuff, of course, but they all felt just like natural parts of the world, a natural part of my story, my journey throughout the game. The main story to me is inseparable from finding Karlach to saving an owlbear cub or exploring some ancient ruins. And your choices often have noticeable effects on the story and characters. I lost out on recruiting an entire companion because one of the quests required me to kill them. Another companion quest changed that character completely, and not only in terms of their personality or their character art, but physically changed them. And I don't mean just a nasty scar. I think they're basically a different species now, and that was fairly early in with plenty of story left for that character. It captures that D&D thing where you have a goal but just keep getting distracted, but somehow everything more or less works out. And yes, a lot of the choices have a healthy dose of RNG because of the dice rolls, from perception to strength and of course, initiative. That all might be a bit of a shock to players more familiar with the Skyrims and Fallouts of the world where it's more of a hard stat check, because here, putting points into, say, charisma can greatly boost your persuasion roll, but at the end of the day, it's all up to the dice and the great RNGesus, because even the most silver of tongue players can fail with a nat 1. The only thing that can damper the excitement of a nat 20 is the looming nat 1 you just know will rear its ugly head sooner or later. And there were some rolls and choices that made me wonder how things would have played out had the dice come up differently, making me excited to roll a new character and just see what happens if I made a few slightly different decisions, or just to see what happens if I get a different role at that choice. And for those who might feel scared, or those who feel like they'd get frustrated if they were a maxed out strength character that rolls in nat 1, all I gotta say is just try rolling with it. Nat 1s may seem scary, but they often create the most interesting and memorable stories. Just roll with it. And if you still can't deal with it, well, it is a video game, so a heavy hand on the save button, some scum, and wouldn't you know it, you're suddenly the luckiest bastard around. Play how you like, I really don't care, and I don't think the game does either. But because of that almighty dice, it guarantees a different experience every playthrough. And all of the game's depths extend to the best part of every RPG. Character creation, which has so many different options for your race and class and subclass and which god you worship, which profession you had before the events of the game, and so much more. You can really flesh out your character's backstory and personality and make your own unique character. But for as varied as the character creation is for backstory, it feels weirdly limited when it comes to your physical appearance, with only a tall and average feminine and tall and average masculine body type, and a handful of preset options for faces. Most of the customization comes in the shape of hair, face, tattoos, and horns if your race has them. And to be fair, there's a fair amount of options for all of those categories, but unlike other games in the CRPG genre where the camera is almost always zoomed out, so I don't care much about my character's physical appearance because I never see it, here the camera often zooms right in whenever you talk to anyone, giving you a good long look at your custom character, which is nice and cinematic and makes you feel more connected to the characters, but I would have liked to see more options for the face, some more presets at least to make my character look like my own. But characters start to really come into their own once you start leveling up. You don't level up often, the cap is 12, but you can feel it, especially if you pick a class like a wizard who's always getting new spells every level up, opening up your gameplay options all the more. And with the ability to multi-class and the huge variety of unique classes available to you, you can make some very unique builds. But I will admit, the game doesn't do a great job of teaching itself to you. It took longer than I care to admit to realize it was the little lights on top of the hotbar that informed me how many spells I had left for that cast level, and if I knew inspiration capped at 4, I would have used it much more. It just doesn't explain little things like that to you. And the inventory management can feel just cumbersome at times, especially if you're playing solo and having to manage the inventory of effectively 4 characters. I played another CRPG called Wasteland 3 a while back, which deserves way more credit by the way, and that game had a few little quality of life changes I would have liked to see brought over here. For example, after a battle, you didn't have to go to every single enemy you killed to loot it, you just had to go to one and it would show you the inventories of all of the enemies you killed and you could just loot them all from there. You also didn't have to make sure you had the lockpicking character or the charismatic character selected when you want them to do their respective jobs. So long as they were in your party, you got their respective bonuses. It was just convenient, and across a 100+ hour RPG saved you a lot of time and hassle when you're constantly having to switch to a different character to pick this lock or disarm this trap or woo your waifu. Another issue I had is that when you're out exploring the open world, the game rolls perception automatically, which is fine and can lead to a nice surprise if you succeed and find a hidden treasure chest, or abject fear if every party member fails a perception roll and you're left to wonder if that's some hidden loot you just walked past or if you're about to take a fireball to the face. The issue is that I found perception rolls sometimes came too late, giving me little time to avoid any traps even if I succeeded on the roll. But honestly, those are all small quibbles in the grand scheme of things. Baldur's Gate 3 is at least my dream RPG. It's got enough depth in both world building, story, and gameplay to dive into as deep as possible. I love the writing, love the characters even more. This is an instant classic that'll be talked about next to KOTOR and New Vegas and all of the greats, and it deserves all of the praise.
She is formidable.